Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are with the newly named show. It's the weekend show now because we've had so many Saturday to Sunday blips. We've decided to call it the weekend show, and here we are coming on a Sunday morning, and it's good to be back. And it's also good to be back with the mystery man who went, well, we don't know what happened. A little bit of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Didn't know where he was. We seek him here, we seek him there. He didn't turn up last week, but so pleased that he's okay. I've had people saying, that it was like seeing somebody out on a sunny day without their shadow, that I miss the lucky charm, the favourite piece of furniture, the comfort factor, yin and his yang, and also somebody who said, you finally lost the bad penny, but I wouldn't expect. So I'm so pleased that you're back, lovely boy, and glad that.
Good morning, Chris. Okay. Good morning.
And there's no need to go into the reason for the absence, just to say that it's great to have you back.
Well, the only thing I would say is thanks, Luke. It's good to be here. I missed last week, but I watched the show with envy. I did like the still that was there, but look, I did have a few comments from some friends who either sent me a WhatsApp or a message and wondering. Actually very curious as to my whereabouts. And one of my more sympathetic correspondents, a gentleman by the name of Nick Eden, who you might know, Chris, Nick's, for those that Nick's runs a firm called Air Dispatch. He's the MD of Air Dispatch. Nick said, well, on Saturday afternoon, you were drinking with me, Stephen, so I don't quite know what happened after that.
Well,
so anyway, we'll leave it there. That's all we need to know.
Exactly.
We like a bit of mystique and curiosity. Will do our listeners a little bit of good.
Yes, always good to have a little bit of intrigue. Right, lovely boy. So now here we are, another week, and we've always said that we try and be positive and talk about plan positives, which you can always find, but it's getting very hard, very, very difficult and hard now. Mm-hmm. And I just think one of the things, Steve, that, the airline, and we talk about the industry and the aviation industry, at the end of the day, the airline's at the top of the tree because of the equipment, because of the passengers, because of the business that it generates. And our industry now, this going through so much pain and challenging the resilience. There's no rule book written, no reference to look for. And this damn crisis and the way people are reacting to it or trying to manage themselves through it is just hitting with such an enormous scale. So the first thing, and I know from a political standpoint, you've got no problem answering this, but my goodness me, the governments, but especially our own, or I say our own, the UK and Ireland, and they've got to do something to recognise it and step forward, because what's going on is ridiculous, because it's going to be needed so quickly. And I think you agree, unlike so many that are looking at forecasts on when things are going to come back, if there's confidence, if there's either a better balance of therapeutics or vaccines, everybody's going to go crazy. They're going to want to travel. They're going to want to see their friends. They're going to see their family. They're going to want to see parts of the world. They're going to want to make memories again. So it's going to take off, but it needs a solid, stable reflection now, whereby what does come is going to be something that people will be proud of again. And again, from this crisis to care, it's so relevant. What we do now is going to pave the way for what happens in the future. Why on earth are they not listening, Steve? Whether it's testing and this incredible high number of value of consultants used for the test and trace is an absolute disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Well,
Sorry, I'm getting used to it now because you weren't there with me last week. And now, with the fact that you've got people in the same household looking at their app and getting different messages, it's madness how such IT blips can be happening with that amount of money spent on it. Now, Steve, welcome back. Over to you, my friend. I love the white shirt. I love the white shirt.
Thank you. Chris, look, you've covered a lot there. I mean, that just a debate or discussion on those points that you mentioned could fill a show. But a couple of things that you mentioned, I just take it and sort of break it down. I think you touched on sentiment. He touched on kind of, the sort of the commitments or promises that were made by government and been broken.
Yeah.
You touched on kind of the impact, therefore, to infrastructure and potentially the lack of that infrastructure being available when the thing returns. And the fourth thing, and more critically, I think, is the public buy-in. So if you look at those, take each one in isolation. If you look at sentiment, there was a lot of rhetoric at the beginning, Chris, from all parts. All parts of government, all parts of public health bodies, all parts of industry, and that rhetoric was used to bring people on the journey with them. So this is the issue. This is the size and scale of the epidemic. This is what one needs to do. These are the impacts it's going to have. But don't worry, your government is behind you. Now, every government in the world said that, right? So there was no uniqueness. But then they went a little bit further. So in terms of the people generally, I suspect, in whichever country, region, market, continent you look, the sentiment was generally positive from people about the actions that governments were taking at that time to keep us safe, quote unquote. And I think largely people got behind it, and that allowed them a bit of breathing space in those early days. But then you sort of move that on and say, look, what were some of the commitments then that were made, in those early days? So if you look at some of the policy decisions that were made early on, well, of course, it was to protect jobs as much as they could. So get behind from a payroll perspective and support employers with job retention schemes or JobKeeper or whatever the payroll support scheme in the US, whatever all these various schemes around the world were. But again, largely similar, didn't look different, maybe 70, 80, 90%, whatever, but the same. Singapore government went one stage further and employed all the people at the airports into public service roles in the city state, and but that from a policy perspective worked. What they then said to us was, and this is the crux of it, you then started to hear government saying, aviation is quote unquote really important.
Yep.
We will, we recognize that aviation is important. They did that in this country here in the UK. The Taoiseach in Ireland set up an aviation task force. Minister Ryan has still got the report on his desk, by the way, and done absolutely nothing with it whatsoever. The UK did not set a task force up. Australia had a bit of to and froing between Qantas and Virgin at the time. Virgin, of course, going through their own challenges. And but you heard some noises. Grant Shapps, that muttonhead of a transport secretary in the UK, don't suspect it would do much work for the DfT, but there we go, that's all right. He said publicly in Parliament, he said, we will stand by aviation, we will stand with you, and we'll come up with a bespoke scheme. So we're now on the 18th of October, Chris, and that was made in
a second wave.
Going into a second wave
with even more problems.
Even more problems, and our industry has been decimated. So that rhetoric to bring the sentiment, positive and bring people on the journey at the beginning was good, but it was a political vehicle and a tool always. They're doing it for political purpose, but it's fine. The science allegedly supported their actions, so tick. The second piece was promises made, promises not delivered, gone by the wayside. Yeah. So you then look at the effect of those promises on industry, and I think, well, hang on, here we are now in October, and you look at the thousands, tens of thousands of jobs just in the UK alone, Chris, lost as a result of this pandemic, specifically in aviation. Then you look down the supply chain and across the supply chain in ground handling, in the airport operators, in the forwarders, in the terminal operators, in the agent, wherever these people were, they were affected. Travel agents, who were conned, if I want to use for want of a better term, but conned because they bought into the sentiment at the beginning. But then they were sold false promises. But based on the promises being made, and they all believed in it on the outset, the government were bloody crafty. Governments, I mean, not just here, I mean, everywhere. Yeah. They did nothing, Chris, zero for industry. So now we've got a situation where in UK particularly, and Ireland, sort of competing for bottom place, the UK and Ireland, in terms of the response to this bloody whole thing. But the reality is that we've now lost all these jobs that will be very difficult to recover again. we've had industry put faith in government, and one thing I've said in this podcast before is never put faith in government, because actually private sector are far better at delivering outcomes. We'll come on to that in a minute. I know it's rather topical when it comes to testing.
Oh, we will.
However,
and also the local and
argument, which is one of the things that I've said is, look, private sector generally is better at getting outcomes faster and quicker, right? However, this needed, government to shepherd and corral us to an outcome that was universal and was fair for all, based on their contribution to either the economy, to GDP, or the way I look at it from the Asian perspective is saying, governments in Asia, Chris, really do value airlines and airports as central infrastructure.
Yep.
And that's the reason that a lot of them are still publicly owned, or state-owned, or through state investment vehicles or whatever. But largely, the state either has a controlling interest, or the state has an interest as a landowner, freeholder, whatever, in the airport. And that gives them, therefore, the rights of, developing and managing the crisis in the best way possible for the outcomes of that country. So they can almost do it hand in glove. Here, where you've got private sector fighting for responses from government, those responses never come. Government make a little bit of noise, just keep quiet, lads, sit down, relax, go away for now. We'll come back to when we've got a solution. Oh, job retention is enough, or job keepers enough. Or actually, frankly, you know what? It's not. Now that takes me to the fourth point then. In terms of, so you lose the infrastructure capability, you lose the airlift capacity. It's had massive effects on supply chain, on deliveries. We're in the UK are going into a new world on the 1st of January. Who knows what that will look like? The withdrawal agreement comes to an end, and we're now potentially in a no deal scenario. Who could believe? I thought the deal was up and ready, said the Prime Minister. So my fourth point then is, when the restart comes, because of the sentiment being positive at the beginning, the false promises made but latched onto because people were positive on the journey. The third piece then was that the infrastructure or the sort of falls by the wayside. And then the last piece is saying, well, where now is the resource? When this restart comes, or when this vaccine comes, or when these therapeutic medicine is improved, or whatever happens in that regard, where are the people? Where are the aircraft? Where, airports have to close, Chris. I mean, this is a really negative sort of opening gambit of ours for the week, for the weekend show. But my biggest fear now is saying, when we do have this uptick, and I think that uptick will come, and I really am, I think we've seen a much more prolonged and sustained drop in demand. That's really, really worrying. But when it comes, are we ready? That, Chris, I don't know, and I think there's a lot of work to be done in that regard.
100%. And the point that you made about the story, everybody needs a story to align to and to appreciate and understand. But this damn story has gone from once upon a time to they lived happily ever after, and there was very little substance in between. There was little reference to heroes, little reference to villains, little reference to scenarios that crop up in every story, and very, very few milestones. And this is what will happen if. And now, Steve, this rubbish with the arguing between central and local, and it is ridiculous to have so many different concessions. Either something happens, this is what will be the result, and you will do this. It's a very simple thing. Clarity needs to be given at the very beginning so everybody understands. Then consistency, and then control. And they've got to do it, and they've got to make that happen
in equal measure.
As quickly as possible. And I just don't understand. I do not understand it. And now, something that I was quite interested in, TIACA and Pharma.Aero, they did a survey, and they've got a Sunrays Survey, Sunray program, and they surveyed 180 organisations, whether it be airlines, freight forwarders, GHAs, airport operators, or solution providers. And the majority was saying that they're not ready for vaccines. The industry isn't ready for vaccines. They're all saying that they've started discussing and debating, and there's different task forces, as I mentioned last week, with lots of the GHAs and airports, but it's not ready. Now, some of that absolutely ridiculous numbers of monies that was spent on a track and trace when there's so many systems and examples that were in place way before. That money should be spent on things like that, making sure that there was proper assistance, proper guidelines, as you said, shepherding the industry to make sure that when this does come, there's going to be no more mistakes, because people have got to stop saying, we're learning and we weren't aware and all this. It's enough's enough now. They've got to start doing something that makes sense, and also not giving people false hope with obviously the furlough system and different other now modifications are great for people, but it was given the wrong message, and it was making people assume that no matter what happens, you're always going to get money. And we've got to now start working at the top of the tree and let everybody get the benefits of the cascade down if it's managed properly. So that's part of the good news for the outlook for the week, Steve. And it's crazy. Now another thing, to find. Another thing, and this is something important for yourself, because obviously in your consultancy position and world, sometimes the most important thing is the level of communication and how you communicate and bringing people on board. And when you look at now the safety that's on an airline once you actually get on the plane, so the IATA report that referred to how safe and hygiene it was once you got on the aircraft, what people now need to see is consistency from getting from home to the airport and what happens whilst you're in the airport. So now all the things that were debated in the past, whether it be the level of biometrics, self-service check-in, self-service security with the help of biometrics, all of those things now need to be sped up as quickly as possible, but not to have an avalanche of options, getting people together to say, look, these are the realistic, accredited or certified options. This is what needs to be done now for the good of the industry. What do you think? Yeah. Look, I don't disagree, because I think we've said from the beginning. We knew. Again, it's not been disparaging to those within our industry and supply and across the cargo handling chain. But we knew from the beginning, Chris, that the industry was not ready to deal with such large scale of vaccine. We said that early on. The second thing we also said is that universal application of standards is critical. I think what you just said earlier there was the governments had bought some time, and they bought people sort of buy-in, but there's gone now. It's finished. And they wasted that time. They wasted that time on pissing around with nonsensical measures, with questioning the use of bloody masks. I mean that was just nonsense, right? Sorry to interrupt you. Right, we were right behind the masks from the very beginning, and even WHO was saying that it wasn't that necessary. Do you know, I watched a follow-up with the head of WHO, and he was actually conducting an online webinar wearing a mask. Of all the times that he didn't need to wear the bloody thing. Yeah. I was just looking at fell out my pocket there. But look, I mean, my mask is sort of everywhere around. It's always been there. But we said you remind me of BJ now. You just need a pink one, Chris. He did. But that just you saying I remind you of BJ. I'm not sure how to take that. Anyhow, never mind. Don't worry, BJ. Well, BJ is a stalwart, a large figure in our industry, Chris. I mean, who would be offended with such a comparison? No, I'm not offended. He knows what I mean. But look, so coming to private sector, the private sector generally is more agile, is more efficient in terms of delivery models. But when I think, what some of these consulting firms, including our own, Chris, and also as you well know, and those that we've done work with, we've done a fair chunk of pro bono work. We've done a large amount of discounted work. In fact, we discounted our rates in March, right in the early days.
And so it kind of grates on me a little bit, not because of impact in my business and Skylight Aviation and our team, but it grates on me that people like BCG think they can still charge public sector £7,350 per day for a partner's involvement on this project, and a project that has largely been well, I wouldn't say it failed, but I think there are certainly significant holes in the outcomes. Now, again, something we said early on was from March, I had on my phone the Malaysian track and trace version.
Yep.
We were told to wear masks. We were told to scan in. If you want to have your liberties, you want to go out and live a relatively normal life, you wear a mask and you download the app. It was very simple. It was a very clear message. There was no question about this mask, a question about whether we should use it as a question about it. Now what we've seen is that clown Grant Shapps, again, to come back to him, because he was saying before, well, airport testing, aviation testing, not really sure that's the way forward. The class 2 laboratory licenses, we don't issue those for airports, for private sector, not for private, they do for private sector, obviously, but they don't, they can't have them in an airport environment. But you get false positive, you get false negatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all this sort of, whereas meantime, Germany up and running with testing, Malaysia up and running with testing, Japan up and running, Korea testing, Hong Kong testing, everybody in the world is testing except the Transport Secretary of the United Kingdom, who thinks he knows better. Now we hear, finally, that the Transport Secretary said, we'll consider a testing solution to support. I said, you absolute moron, what you've done now is you've destroyed tens of thousands of jobs. You've negated tens of billions of pounds and euros of economic and capital spend because of your decision making that has given people the false hope of these quarantine corridors or no quarantine corridors, green lanes, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then you chop and change, quicker than I've had had a hot bath or had a hot dinner, as my mother would have said years ago. But people don't get any consistency from that. What you do at consistency from testing with Chris is, yes, there are false negatives, but you can manage out those false negatives with the shedding, with the reduced quarantine period, and you can, and then so we very proudly say in government. I say we. I'm not part of government for sure. Bloody hell. Sorry. They say down in Whitehall. Not yet. I have to say Whitehall is just a mile down the road from my apartment, so it's very close by. But they say that I forgot where I was going with this now, where I was heading with that point. But they say they're proud of our academics and our university. And then we see today, or yesterday, I think it was in the news, Oxford University now developing a 5-minute rapid test. Well, that's kind of game changing. So testing is not going to be here forever, but until we can get some certainty and we can have sustained improvement in terms of, I expect the transmission rate will remain. I expect we'll see much more increase as we go into the winter months. But testing is there is a lever. Yep. It's a lever they can pull, and they should have used it months and months and months ago, and we didn't. We've lost tens of thousands of jobs as a result. We've lost tens of billions of contribution to the economy, and suddenly the airline and airport landscape will never be the same again because of these decisions made by government. And there are no more excuses now. They can't say we're still learning because they've had enough bloody time to learn. We've all learned. Exactly,
and where they focused on immediate impact and giving a message that everything will be okay, instead of looking at a longer term sustainability and investment correctly, to make sure that things were able to be agile and resilient. I just think it's absolutely embarrassing. And I don't think the opposition, and we shouldn't be really getting into politics, but I don't think the opposition are doing themselves any favours either when all they do is criticise and don't give an alternative and nobody gives an opinion. And equally, I don't think the bloody journalists, when they keep pushing people to say either yes or no, they got to stop all this. Somebody has got to get some common sense back.
The media has a lot to answer for, Chris, in this whole affair.
In a more effective manner. It's terrible. Yeah. Right, now, moving on with all of these issues. So, and just to endorse what you've been saying, Luton, 66% down on September against last year. So,
no surprise.
In a podcast with Liam, I mean, that's terrible. It's such a shame. Ryanair, so further winter capacity cuts shutting 3 bases, which is also terrible. You know, the forecast down from 60% to 40% against last year's levels. Cork, Shannon, Toulouse closed over the winter, reducing their aircraft base in Belgium, Germany and Spain. You know, it's terrible. 85% drop in passenger numbers at Brussels in September. I mean, those sort of issues are absolutely terrible. And then you see United Airlines with their third quarter results and a total of something like 20 plus or 22,000 employees being released from there. I mean, it's awful, Steve. And then you've got, I know you love Australia. You've got poor old Virgin Australia now being considered as a future strategy low-cost carrier, or, you know, what do you think's happening there?
Well, look, sad to see all that negative news, Chris, is no surprise. I think it reflects the actions or inaction of government and the despair felt by all in industry. You mentioned all those European countries. The one thing I would say stands out is Germany. You look at all these infection rates that are massively rising around the whole of Europe, and there's Fortress Germany that actually are doing very well. Funnily enough, we're the only countries in Europe to do massive testing for travel. So Frau Merkel has done a grand job there, I think, with her people. But nonetheless, of course, Lufthansa are massively affected because the hub. I think hub carriers will struggle going forward. Going on to Australia, yes, Australia is very close to my heart. I'm an honorary Aussie. Look, I think I can't say that I'm surprised, Chris. I think I feel sorry for Paul Scurra. I think Paul had endeared himself to the management team, to his management team and to his employee group. I think a lot of the conditioning that was done in terms of getting the approval for the transaction by Bain Capital and the acquisition with the credit and the creditor agreements was secured because of Paul's specific and personal engagement with the employee groups. So it's all very clear. We've seen Steve Pervinas from the ALAA come out. We've seen the TWA come out. All cautious and concerned that Virgin Australia will be a couple of things. One is traded down, if you like, to more of an LCC competitor, to Jetstar rather than a full service airline competitor to Qantas. And we've also seen them, very, very, very concerned that Jane Hurdica's appointment specifically means there is a threat to their EBAs and their terms and conditions. Now, I feel for the employee groups, of course, but I think the change in the model is probably the right one, Chris. I think a smaller Virgin Australia with a domestic regional focus is probably the one that is preferred going forward in terms of the landscape. Competitively, we know that Virgin couldn't compete with Qantas before. Going up against sort of Fortress Qantas in their own backyard is always going to be a tough game. Ironically, before 2010-11, when John Borghetti got into Virgin Australia, as was then Virgin Blue, they'd been profitable for each year of their existence until they traded up to become a full-service airline. And with all these strange, funny relationships, that kind of marriage of, I don't know what it was. It was a very odd arrangement with Etihad and Singapore Airlines and Air New Zealand, and it was very strange. All very unhappy bedfellows. Consequently, massive capital, and of course ended up where they were. So I don't think the model is wrong, Chris. I think actually, being somewhere between Jetstar and Qantas probably is the right thing. I think let's watch this space and see what happens with the employees and see what happens going forward. But there'll be more right sizing to be done. But of course, Qantas still haven't recovered much of their network either. Great to see Qantas announcing this week that they'll restart some of their international flying, mostly on repatriation services again, because as you know, the Australian government came under massive criticism for locking down their borders to their own people. So anyway, slow improvements there, changes there. The other one I've just seen this week went sort of quietly by the wayside, Chris, was AirAsia Japan's demise. They sort of quietly announced that, I think, in light with AirAsia X restructuring and their sort of pause, if you like. Japan is closed. I'm not surprised by that, having spent some time there myself and knowing how difficult it has been for them before all of this started. So I think you see a little bit of a clean up in some of those operations that were there.
So much. But just sorry, going back to Virgin Australia again, and something that we spoke about several shows ago about the transparency and lack of trust between workers, unions, and the actual management of the company. So you've got Michael Caine, the key Virgin, which is actually the same namesake as my grandfather. But Michael Caine, suggesting that that Bain were a slippery vehicle now, and that it wasn't right that when Scurry gave his word was his bond, etc. And now, because of this change, they're trying to oppose it and say it shouldn't happen. Again, it's this understanding, because everybody can't be protected when something like this happens, and the practical sizing almost is affected week on week, month on month, definitely. So somewhere in the future now, there's got to be a better degree of awareness and transparency of business best practices or business urgent practices when certain things affect those businesses, so people become more aware. Because sometimes that, just putting your heels in and being belligerent as to what is necessary, it causes as many problems again. But the only consistency there is that Michael Caine said that Michael McCormack was perpetually in action. And there you have another transport minister. They seem to be ministers of transport without understanding what transport actually needs from a minister.
Well, I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, transport seems to be a portfolio that ends up for those sort of, it's like a holding pool, sort of the special projects department. When you move to special projects, your time is up. I think transport is seen as special projects in government, which I cannot fathom out. It is absolutely critical from an infrastructure perspective that these people are, I don't expect them to be appointing, senior experienced aviation executives or transport executives into transport minister roles, because that's probably not likely. But at least a minister would be helpful. McCormack, of course, also is a leader of the Nationals, so just be mindful of that, and he's also deputy prime minister, but that's because of the coalition in Australia. But look, I do think there should be a healthy degree of challenge and question between management, unions, employee groups. That's a good thing to have. But if you don't trust your employer, or if you don't trust the shareholders to do the right thing by your people, now, it's one thing if the economic circumstances change significantly. So in Bain's defense, Chris, I think what we've seen actually is a degradation and deterioration of the landscape in the last few months. So Michael Caine can speak up for his members all he likes. Linda White will do the same for the ASU. Steve Provinos do the same for the ALEA. All very good for them. But these are fellas that are earning $200,000 salaries off their membership. So need I say more about our friend Glenn McCluskey in the UK as well at Unite? 165 grand a year and a chauffeur-driven Range Rover. I'm not really sure that the heart is in it for the members, Chris. So, you can understand from a shareholder perspective, I would be questioning as a member the subs that I'm paying funding Len McCluskey's lifestyle or Michael Caine's lifestyle. It's all very well for him to question the shareholders' motives, but the shareholders' motives are the ones that have rescued thousands of jobs. Now,
Exactly.
if they can rescue 50% of those 10,000 jobs, that's a bloody good thing, I think. Yes. So get your head back out your proverbial and actually try to come to the table constructively and pragmatically. If Scurra has gone, and I know Scurra to be a man of principle, something clearly happened at the shareholder level that meant it was untenable. Jane Herdlicker was sort of sitting in the wings there, sort of, a little bit of healthy pressure. I think that pressure probably became a little bit more than they'd expected, and I suspect that he pulled the pin. But look, Chris, we could use the same proxy across any. The same thing with British Airways here, taking unnecessary public flack and parliamentary flack that was totally unhealthy, not conducive to solving the problem. Get round the table, speak to one another, and actually share transparently your objectives. If you disagree, but at least we get to an outcome.
Yeah, no, I agree. And sometimes that extra focus and incorrect picture that's placed by journalism and government is wrong, and it's totally misplaced. It's wrong. Now, you just mentioned there about some changes. Obviously, you got the changes now with
British Airways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Look, I mean, I think I'm not sure that the timing was. I mean, Alex's exit at BA was fast. But I suspect, I suspect a lot of this was probably set up before Willie's departure. I would have thought. So I don't think there's any surprise there. I think Luis obviously wants his own team of people in place. He's made a couple of promotions internally. He's brought Sean Doyle over from Aer Lingus.
Yeah.
But of course, one thing to remember is Sean is a BA 20-year veteran in any case. He's not really an Aer Lingus man, despite being a good Irishman, Chris, which you will assimilate with. But of course, that creates opportunities for others through the organisation. I think Luis will be setting out his stall and needs his people on behind the stall to market his goods in the way that he wants. A clean break from some of the, and I think unfairly, Alex took a lot of flack for decisions that were probably being made at a holding company level by IAG, because we know how close Willie was to the tiller. His hand was always on at the tiller. So I think Alex has sadly been a bit of a fall guy, but I would suspect that has gone down rather positively with the unions and with some of the employee groups.
Yes, which again is a little bit of placating all of the verbal feedback and blustering that's going on.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of organisations now that are going to replace people, not because they weren't doing what they should be doing, but just because to replace gives a new energy and a new breath of fresh air.
It does.
And also a different style and a different type of person to get organisations through this crisis.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, incredible. Now, coming back to the vaccine, Steve, I mean, so important. And what with Mr. Trump's miraculous recovery, with all of the I was going to say,
from what, I wonder, Chris?
Mixes, lotions and potions. Obviously, there's going to be a huge emphasis on therapeutics and also this vaccine. And just coming back to the TIACA and the Pharma.Aero, that survey and what they needed. Emir Pineda. I hope Emir doesn't mind my pronunciation. But in Miami, and he's a TIACA board member, and he's also the co-leader of the Sunrays project. What he said was that as an industry, we're only as strong as our weakest link, and to move the needle on industry readiness, we need to ensure everyone is engaged and informed. And again, I think this comes back now to some real collaboration need now. People need to get together, stop huffing and puffing and looking how good they all look in the mirror individually, and make sure that for the good of the industry now, things are done as well as possible and collectively and in a cost-effective fashion.
Yeah, I think the time is nigh, as one. The
time is nigh. Yeah.
I think that no time like the present, Chris. There is a there is a need for better collaboration. There's a need for more transparency, but also there's a need for I guess a level of commitment or conviction.
Yep.
In terms of accepting some of the challenges that we've got today, speaking about them openly and objectively, and trying to work together as an industry to solve them. So, yep. I mean, I think there's a lot to be done in that regard. It'll need somebody some group, some body, not somebody. Somebody to take the lead. So I'm pleased to see that TIACA and the guys are doing that. I think that's really helpful. But our old sparring partners in Geneva and Montreal will have to come to the party. And also, I think there has to be an element of government sponsorship locally to help drive. If government want, and it doesn't mean paying $7,500 a day for a consultant. As much as Scarlet Aviation would be very happy to support you, $7,500 a day. I think that's morally unjust that these guys could charge such fees. By the way, I think that for such a public health sort of response. But in that regard, there has to be, we're all in this together. It's an all for one for all type of approach.
Yeah.
And that means that funding to respond to this has to be managed centrally. We can't be expecting some of the small forwarders who are critical and could be that weakest chain in the link, Chris, to fall over or have to fund it, through dwindling cash reserves. That would be unacceptable in my view, and therefore there has to be a model to support that, I think.
I 100% agree. And also, there needs to be more practical clarity. Now, we're talking about moral and ethically wrong to be taking 7,350 a day, but the government are wrong, Steve, for paying it. It's ridiculous. And now this with the vaccines, they need to have a good, solid, practical body of people who understands the difficulty, the complexity, what goes on the practical side with regards to handling in the pharma, handling in the pharma environment. And that covers things like dedicated teams, 24/7 availability, special care services, airside thermal protection, extra insurance, express bookings, fast breakdown, clearance at any time from stakeholders and customs, special handling, special monitoring services. Then you've got things like the staff themselves, how well are they trained, the use of loggers, various sockets, containers, charter flights, call rooms, software, communities. Then you've got transport, maybe giving a bit of last mile support within it because they've got temperature controlled vehicles. All of those things is not a simple, easy thing. And the amount of money that's been wasted should be spent better training these people so that when the vaccines come in, the one good thing, please God, that would come out of it is the speed, the accuracy, and just the general professionalism that's necessary to handle this moving forward. And that's not £7,350 a bloody day from some theoretical person who still is not able to get over these glitches.
You think if you're paying for that, you're getting best in class, Chris. And disappointing, therefore, that I want these fellas to show their faces, but of course they'll never be outed. Never be outed. But they should be publicly hung. No, not now. I have to say not now. This should only come after. The board of inquiry has to be after the event. Don't distract from the immediate tactical requirements. But they should be hung out to dry. The thing you just touched on there, Chris, is about this sort of industry task force. Having a voice of industry in these central lobbies of Whitehall, or it could be in Canberra, or it could be in Paris, or it could be in government buildings in Dublin, or wherever this is. The UK government announced a testing task force last week.
Yep.
Did you see it? Did you see the composition of such task force?
Yeah, and what practical experience?
The task force membership is Secretary of State for Health, Secretary of State for Transport, Secretary of State for a Minister of so-and-so, a permanent secretary for this. There is not one single industry person, or even, I would accept this as an industry person, but somebody from private sector that knows about this. Not one. The other thing is, I would have expected, given that the logistics corps and the Ministry of Defence do a fabulous job, I'd have expected somebody from the military, from the army, the RAF, whatever, who manage these large. Not one. And yet you've got all these bloody 3-star, 4-star generals, and their band of merry men. Aye, aye, sir. Yes, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Who sergeant majors that know about how to manage large logistical operations. Not once has the military been considered either. That's what I do think would be a very helpful thing. Some of that sponsorship or some of that corralling that can be done. The government could easily offer up the MOD to support this and this stuff, but nothing. Zero. Absolutely zero.
Yeah, and there's some incredibly experienced and practical experts within the forces, and all credit to them, and they should be involved in something like this as well. But anyhow, there we go. Listen, we're coming near to the end of the time, and
I've enjoyed it. It's nice being back, Chris.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to have you back. And
look, I have to confess, though, after 28 weeks of this, I think I'm not sure. Salam will tell us, but it's 28 or 29 weeks we've done. I mean, we we've done quite a lot of these, many more than I signed up for, Chris. The check has suddenly gone missing in the post at my appearance fee, but
you are doing it. You are doing it out of the goodness of your heart, just like myself and Salem.
Of course I am.
And we both know Salem is sitting there in his nightgown, okay, doing the technical support. So we know that. We also know that you're promoting style, not fashion, because those granddad shirts were an absolute epic when they came out, and they still are.
Chris, this is what I'm a white man from Asia, and I wear a Mandarin collar. So but I've forgotten. I'm in London. And it's probably pretty chilly outside.
But it's good, mate. It's style. But no, we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart.
We are.
A little bit of entertainment, hopefully a little bit of practical.
Oh, I enjoy it. But I was just going to say, look,
a little bit of challenge. Having
done all those weeks, having a week off, you'll understand. 1 week in 28 is not bad going.
Yeah, but Steve, it was like a trapeze artist. I had to get out there on the swing in the circus ring and do my thing without my Robin, without my Hardy, without my Costello.
Without your Jane.
Yeah, and the one good thing was I was beginning to wonder whether I was a person who leapt from the other trapeze and expected to be caught, or I was the catcher. Thank God.
You were the catcher, Chris.
I was the catcher.
You're the catcher. Yeah. Thanks for picking up. You catching that ball and picking it up. It's appreciated.
No, but it's lovely. It's lovely to have you on as always. Your down to earth and outright opinions without bias on any side is always good. It's a great. I enjoy it, Steve. I enjoy it as much as doing it. So I really.
Likewise. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's been good.
I said, I've just looked down here because we didn't do anything of the feedback from people, but several people have actually said you both committed to give a solution or a realistic option to certain things that were raised, and you said that it would be coming before the end of the year. So we have to make a date because we've spoken about some of these initiatives, Steve, and we have to, we have to let people know what's being worked on as well behind the scenes.
I can assure our listeners, Chris, that you and I have not been resting on our laurels over the last few weeks, and there is a lot of work gone into that that we can commit to, or we have committed to. And that is, and I think now we need to actually develop how we communicate that back to either this channel or other channels in terms of the discussions we've been having with industry, with the groups we've been speaking to, and the likely outcomes and what benefits that might provide the broader audience.
Yeah, brilliant. And just before we end, I would like to just finish with one thing, and I won't go into detail at this moment, but our industry and the fact that it's global allows you to make friends and contacts that can be so important. And something happened to me this week, which just brought home how important it is to be able to reach out to people at a time of need.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but those people were very, very special. And that happened in India. And I will never forget what they did. It was absolutely incredible. But it shows how when people are being people and they care, so much can be done. And I would just suggest that anybody out there, if anybody needs any help or any support, whatever it is, sometimes it's the smallest little thing like writing an email, checking on how somebody is, making sure they're okay, etc. Please do so, because you never know what somebody needs and why they need it. So we need to look after everybody. That's not just in aviation, that's everywhere.
Indeed. Yeah.
So don't want to get too deep as we leave,
nope.
But thanks to everybody who's still listening. Really appreciate it. And Lovely Boy is back on the pedestal, so he'll be here next week. And we look forward to seeing you again, Steve.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you, my friend. We need to put a picture of you in that beautiful nightgown.
Cheers, Chris. See you next week.
All the best.